Well, it tells us that it's a fiction, a polite fiction that we've been telling ourselves, that the UN Charter is real and applies, that countries respect international borders. And even in this case, it's a border that Moscow itself recognized formally in 1991. And yet today we hear Vladimir Putin say that Ukraine, now he said Ukraine, not just eastern Ukraine, so not just the strip that they've covertly been occupying and are now moving to formally annex, but he said Ukraine is an inalienable part of Russia's historical, social, and spiritual space. So, according to his definition, a legal border, which of course is the fundamental definition of sovereignty in the UN Charter, as well as everywhere else, including Russia's own recognition, is less important than spiritual space and historical considerations. So, according to Russia, it's not real. This is the fourth time Vladimir Putin has violated borders. First was Georgia in 2008, and this is the third time now in Ukraine. He's not alone. It was the US in Iraq in 2003, cheered on by John Howard and Tony Blair, that illegally invaded Iraq, just as it was Xi Jinping has been taking maritime territories in the South China Sea from the Philippines and others, contrary to a ruling by the International Arbitral Court of The Hague. So there's three great powers, all three of them helping themselves to the territory of of other countries when it suits them.
And when you talk of those three mega powers, superpowers, although Russia is less one these days, what sanction is going to have any impact?
Well, exactly right. You can't say that Vladimir Putin wasn't warned of sanctions led by the US, but also other NATO countries and an array of other countries around the world. The Western powers and some others have been spelling out very clearly what sanctions would apply if he were to go ahead. And he's looked at that list of costs and he's looked at the territory he wants and decided it's worth the price. So that tells you, I would suggest, Bev, that short of someone actually intervening physically to prevent him crossing the border, no sanction is going to work. He's been threatened with every non-kinetic sanction, just about, that the Western world can think of.
And, you know, the US, as you point out, has talked a lot, and certainly the West has come out very strongly in opposition to what he's doing. But the reality is they are not going to do anything practical. So the US is wanting to defend Ukraine, but it has bigger issues on its plate, as you have pointed out before.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And in the column that I had in this morning's papers, Bev, quoting authoritative American strategists, the author of the most recent US National Defense Strategy, Elbridge Colby, and also the guy who's currently Joe Biden's chief China advisor in the White House, Rush Doshi, both of them saying, so one was working for Donald Trump, the other is working for Joe Biden, but both converge on this same point. It's exactly as you say, Bev. Russia, for all its power, is not the main game. For the US, the main game is China. They see the China contest as being an all-consuming one. They say that they can't afford, that the US can't afford to be detained or entangled or distracted by any physical or kinetic hot war with Russia. That Russia is, I mean, we know Russia's economy is 1/10 the size of China's, and its power is declining relatively. Its economy is around the same size as Australia's, and it's smaller than South Korea's. The US sees Russia as the crisis of the moment, but not the crisis of the decade or the century. And Joe Biden himself has said the US is engaged in what he calls the competition with China for the 21st century. They see, all of those figures see China as the unique threat to the US, the only country capable of, if it can establish hegemony in Asia, would allow it to aggregate enough economic power, most of the world economy, under its hegemony, to then give it the heft to be able to threaten the US with economic coercion and beyond that, using that to threaten its liberty and its prosperity. So that is the big challenge they see. They see China as a peer competitor, and they don't have time or resources to deal forcefully with Russia.
Scott Morrison has condemned the action and has described the pretext as nonsense, as many other Western nations have. How might Scott Morrison use this, though? What might be the implications for us?
Well, there are two. One is a natural, logical, and I would suggest to you, realistic extension of the lesson now being learned at the expense of the people of Ukraine. And that is that there is no rules-based order. There is no order. The only rule is the rule of the jungle, the law of the jungle, and the only order is the order of battle. And that while today it's Russia ignoring international law, convention, and the UN Charter, tomorrow it will be someone else. And the country that everybody, I think, has most to worry about is China. Vastly more powerful, much more crafty, less obvious, less brazen than Putin, for whom putting on a show seems to be half the motivation. So that's the first point, is that we should expect other countries, not just Russia, to behave like this and to expect to get away with it. That's the first point. The second point is more domestic and political. And the political point is the Liberals, the coalition government here, considers that as long as national security is the subject that we're talking about, then that naturally predisposes us to thinking favourably about the Liberal Party because of long-standing brand associations the coalition has on national security as one of its two strengths, together with economic management. And so Scott Morrison sees this as 3 months' worth of talking points where he can warn of instability, insecurity, threats to the international order, and threats to Australia.
Good to talk, as always, Peter. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, Bev.